Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast. We have Helen McGuire with us today. Helen is a LinkedIn top voice, shaping authentic influence for founders and leaders. She's a 3X Exit founder. She's an advisor, speaker, and author. Female Founder Formula is her book if you want to check it out. And she's also a CBT and Reiki accredited coach. So that is very much under my umbrella, the CBT especially. She's also a mom. Living in Dubai, I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico, and Top Leads GTM is presenting this podcast. If you're a coach and you need help with cold email, and if you want to generate at least 2 to 5 leads per week, you can go to topleads.agency. That is my agency. We help coaches master cold email. Cold email is very hard, but once you master it, it's great. Helen, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you. No, really great to be here. Thanks for having me. Well, I think you covered it probably in my very carefully crafted LinkedIn bio. My background is entrepreneurship. Last 10 years, I've built, scaled, sold 2 businesses. Living here in Dubai, also in Singapore for 4 years. But that second business was very firmly positioned over into the US and UK markets. I gave birth to 3 children at the same time as doing that. So you'd argue I've had 5 kids, and I exited my second business last year, and I'm now helping leaders and founders to build their impact and influence in the world through the playbook that I built and wrote about in my book, The Female Founder Formula.
Interesting. And why Dubai specifically? What's different from Singapore there?
Oh, I mean, they're hugely different places. Have you been, Charles?
Not yet.
No, yeah, okay. You need to visit, and you'll figure out why. But Dubai and Singapore are very different culturally, obviously, very different geographically, very different from a mindset perspective as well. And the world is shifting underneath our feet, and places like Dubai and Singapore are very reflective of that. Let's say one which is, I would say, growing and becoming a lot more open to the world, and one which is perhaps going the other way. And I would choose Dubai any day over the two, having lived for a good period of time in both. But we moved here originally back in 2012 for work reasons. You know, I'm a London girl, 12 years there, building a media career through the BBC and Discovery Channel and so on. And when we moved here to Dubai, that's when the opportunities really started to open up from an entrepreneurship perspective.
Interesting. And yeah, tell me about your exits that you had over the last couple of decades, and why aren't most women going through that?
That's a huge question, isn't it? Look, I think I was always very much in the minority on my journey. My first business was much more of a service-based business, solving the issues of gender equity, first here in the Middle East and then over in Asia. I flipped that into an AI tech model in 2020 with the help of my co-founder, who was very much the driving force on the tech side of things. And I had a vision really to remove bias from the workplace, remove bias from decision-making in the workplace, which is not a thing that's especially possible for human beings. We all have cognitive biases, whether we recognize it or understand it or not, and AI is the perfect solution to removing those in that process, and that was the business that we built and scaled and sold. Now, during that process, I was a non-tech founder in a tech world, raising investment, building a tech business, learning how to sell tech into huge corporates like Visa, for example. And that was not an easy journey. And I was also very much the minority having kids. You know, I went through the Antler Accelerator in 2020. I was probably one of 2 or 3 people on that accelerator who had children. And again, in the minority being a woman. It's hard, you know, and I think those biases that I mentioned, the tech that we created to remove those, are a very obvious part of that problem. But there's also the issues around the obvious issues biological around childcare, childbirth, raising children, being different beings on the planet who have different needs at different times of their life. It's very much a seasonal process being a woman, right? And the world does not necessarily respect that, and it's not necessarily built around that. So, evolution is entirely possible, but it takes time.
Right. And tell me about diversity nowadays, because we've seen like a downscale in the US in DEI. Have diversity as a whole been affected by that? Like we've seen the anti-woke movement as well. What have
Yeah.
you seen from your own eyes with all of that movement?
Yeah, look, I mean, I exited that business in the middle of last year, continued to advise into that business until the end of the year. And we went through all of those changes along with everything that was happening in the US and some of the shifts as well in the rest of the world. My genuine feeling around diversity, equity, and inclusion as a phrase, as a movement, if you like, as an idea, is that it's so little understood. It's so polarized and so politicized as it stands now that it has become meaningless. Many of the efforts to destabilize it and discredit it are very interesting because they're based on not actually understanding what DEI is or what it's designed to do. And so I think it's very ripe for a rebrand. It's very ripe for a new direction. And I think the business of well-being, the business of an increased focus around culture in organizations is a big part of that. Actually, I have a genuine belief that well-being within businesses is DEI dressed up in different clothes. You don't get heads of DEI quite so much these days. They've certainly dropped off LinkedIn and dropped off the kind of common parlance, if you like, but they're being replaced with heads of sustainability, heads of well-being in businesses. And many of those issues that we described and dealt with under DEI are now being dealt with under a different title, essentially.
And aren't most diverse business high performance business? Isn't performance like because your team is diverse?
Yeah, that's what the statistics and practice tell us. I mean, I think you only need to do a Google search and you will find acres and acres and acres of research and evidence around the improved performance and ROI of businesses and teams that are more diverse. And I say that not just from a racial perspective or a gender perspective, but across multiple different touch points. I don't think we need to keep talking about that. I think we need ways of making sure that it happens, and that's why diversity was created. There is the tech out there that solves these problems now. It's up to you as a business as to whether you go ahead and use that.
And incubators like Antler, YC, they're notorious for having low number of female founders. Is that because it's reflective of the number of applicants or just the number of female founders that there are in this market?
I couldn't tell you, Charles. I haven't seen the data that sits behind that. I can only tell you from my own experience that it was probably 80% men on the Antler program that I went through. Any subsequent, I went through 2 other accelerators subsequently to that. That was probably also the case. But I certainly do not think that there is a shortage of female founders. And, having moved back to Dubai in 2021, I was surprised at how much that market had moved on. I could name multiple different networking groups here that support specifically female founders. And there are plenty of female founders just in this city alone. So I don't think it's an issue of women not being in this space. I think it's an issue of probably bias and an opportunity at certain levels.
So I think that AI is an amazing solution as well to sort of remove bias, but some people claim that AI is biased. I just think AI is a reflection of our human brain and reality and truth most of the time. Do you agree with that?
No, I think AI, I know AI is a bit like a child, right? good in, good out, bad in, bad out. And if you want to use ChatGPT as your bias reflector, unfortunately, yes, 100%. And our tech actually uncovered this. There is a paper that we wrote about it, because ChatGPT is based on everything on the internet. And inherently, everything on the internet is based on everything that human beings have put on the internet over the last 20, 30 years, whatever it is, right? So, of course, there's going to be bias built into that. And so when you build AI, you need to be very careful when you use AI. You need to be very careful that you're using a very specific AI-driven solution for the specific problem that you want to solve. And ChatGPT is never going to be that. You know, ChatGPT is a little bit like trying to open a tin can with a fork quite often. There are many specific AI-driven solutions out there that have been trained on very specific models and data to solve very specific problems. And that's where AI is very, very powerful, but it's also where AI can go incredibly wrong very quickly. So, you know, I know this from firsthand experience, having built the tech ourselves. And being very mindful of that. And certainly when you sell to a £9 billion software company, you are going to be under a huge amount of scrutiny about these things. And, you know, ours passed the test at every point. So this is a very important point about AI in general. It's a bit like fire, you know, it can be used to create and it can be used to destroy. And you just have to be very mindful about how you're using it.
Yeah, and prompting it the right way, I guess, is a start. But yeah, of course, it's sycophantic. It will always tell you like, yeah, you're right, even when you're wrong, and so forth. So that's pretty dangerous. But I think still the internet is a good source. It's certainly better source than most data sources out there. Also, they weight the most recent data and the most vetted type of data. I think they're getting better and better. So it's not 100% of the truth, but I think it's still a better source than, let's say, Facebook or Fox News, right?
Yeah, I would say so. But I do think it depends on what you're using it for and what your outcomes need to be. You know, it may pick up a better percentage than watching Fox News, but Fox News, we all know, is inherently biased. It's built for bias, right? It's built to appeal to a very particular audience. That in itself is bias. So yeah, I don't think they're massively comparable, to be honest.
Yeah, Al Jazeera, in your case where you are, how did you remove the bias with your first startup about DEI? How did you actually do that technically?
Oh, I mean, like I said, I'm not the tech brain, so don't ask me from a coding perspective how this all works.
But like surface level, how did you guys remove the bias?
Yeah, we worked very closely with the University of Nottingham Centre for Applied Linguistics back in the UK, who'd been funded by the UK government over the previous 5 years to look at bias specifically in job ads and the results that those job ads were getting. And these were all English language job ads, but they were based all over the world. And basically the issue that the University of Nottingham had was that they had this data and they'd done the work and they were being funded by the government. But to continue that effort and that research, they needed a kind of an application for it. They needed a way to make it useful to the general population. And I was introduced to the team by an old work friend of mine when I was going through Antler. And it was just one of those incredibly serendipitous meetings. This was before I'd even joined forces with my tech co-founder. So I knew we had the bones of what was required. But I didn't have the kind of tech team to put it in place. And so when my co-founder joined, we moved that forward pretty swiftly. And the AI was trained on that data. And that basically looked at job descriptions and highlighted bias within those job descriptions and job ads. So bias language, bias structure, any ways in which people might potentially be not included, essentially, or kind of discounted themselves when they looked at those job ads. And it looked at ways of reframing that and suggesting different phrases, sentences, word structures, and so on, and gave people a score so they could quite easily see where the issues were and where the improvements could be made. But we didn't make decisions for anybody, and that's very key as well, I think, with AI, is that you do need a human across it, because AI should never be allowed to make broad stroke decisions for you. It doesn't always suggest the most relevant things or things that would be relevant necessarily for your business. So it was a many stage process.
I want to learn more about your background because it's uncommon to have like 3 exits as a founder. Like, how were you built to achieve all of that? And what skills or traits did you nurtured over the years to be that successful? Like, I guess grit, right? But let's take it from there so that other female founders could potentially reproduce that.
Well, I hope any founders out there could reproduce that. And I want to be super clear. The business I exited from was my second business. I'm a 3-time founder. I haven't exited three times yet. That might be on the cards, who knows? But look, I mean, I think for me, it starts with being aligned with your purpose and your passion. And it's about building authentically around that and being very dedicated to that, not only in the way that you create the business and what the business is about and the outcomes that you want to see from that business, but equally about the way that you run the business and the decisions that you make for it. And for me, I could have very easily stopped with my first business and just carried on kind of solving the problem at a surface level where diversity was concerned. But I was so married to the problem that I wanted to solve, and I wasn't prepared to let anything stop me from doing that. And that does come back to grit, it comes back to resilience, certainly. It comes back to creativity, resourcefulness. It comes back to just an ability to keep your North Star and build around that. And, this is part of the playbook that I now help others with, is being as transparent and as authentic as you can be in the way that you put across your business purpose and what you're doing in your day-to-day and where you aim to be. This is how I attracted probably the majority of the investors that invested in our second business, clients, community partners, partnerships. And to be honest, eventually the exit came from one of those partnerships that we created through a platform like LinkedIn. Dedication, resourcefulness, creativity, grit, resilience, authenticity, all in different measures at different times.
Very cool. And tell me about your background in Reiki and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is probably my go-to when it comes to psychology. Do you think that contributed to your success and you being into these more esoteric activities?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Reiki and the CBT came after my exit. Not that I wasn't practicing those types of things previously, I was. And the reason this came about was because of my journey. When I was going through that journey, we had multiple, 18 investors globally, multiple advisors, obviously people who were, mentoring us and part of the business. I was very rarely asked as a woman in my position how I was, and how I was coping with things and the types of tools and resources and methods I was putting in place to cope with the inevitable pressures of the day-to-day of it, but equally of growing it, scaling it, exiting it, all the rest of it. And pardon my French here, but it was fucking stressful. And when I exited that business, I recognized that, yes, I had created ways of coping, right? I'd put in place practices, meditations, daily walks. Certainly looking after my physical and mental health became a massive priority just to keep me on track. But I didn't have any frameworks around that I could then, arguably help other founders with and put it in a process that helped other people. And so I did the CBT training, which by that point, I don't know about you, but it felt quite like common sense to me, because it's the way that I was thinking anyway, or trying to think. But it gave me those frameworks and those approaches. And Reiki is something I've always practiced on and off. And so to learn it and to help other people with it, to manage their energy and to align their energy. I did a session this afternoon actually for a founder. Has also become just a regular part of my day to day. And this again massively taps into my point earlier around authenticity, and around building an influential, impactful voice that is going to attract the right opportunities to you. You can't do that if you're not speaking from your own person, from your own genuine experience and background.
Love that. And nowadays you have your book, you have a coaching business, a speaking business. What does a day-to-day life looks like for you? What time do you get up? Like, how long do you work? What habits do you include into there? And like, what's your focus?
Yeah, it's a good question. This shifts, right? This changes. And as my kids have got a little bit older, I can get up a little bit later, which is nice. I'm not a morning person, Charles, at all. So I quite like a slow morning. And I will always do some form of exercise in the morning. I will always start my morning with 7 to 10 minutes of meditation. And I have an app called Aura, which I used for that. I've been using it for several years. And then I'll be up and about and doing my exercise and getting my steps in and all the rest of it. And then generally I'm at my desk or in a meeting or doing something work-wise by about 9:30. I'll take a break in the afternoon to go and grab the kids from school, bring them back, sort them out. And then I'll do a couple of hours more, and then I'll try and shut off. And, I've kind of shifted from this idea of needing to be attached to a laptop or a desk. I don't think work is like that anymore. And I don't think it needs to be like that. WhatsApp is the new email, your LinkedIn profile is your new website. All of this stuff is happening on the go as you are. And so to me, being tied to a desk is no longer a priority. And I try to do as many of my meetings in person as I can. Like the people that are here, I try and meet them in person, because I bloody hate Zoom calls. I had enough of those, right? Apart from this one, obviously.
Interesting. Yeah. So what are you aiming for this year? I mean, you're quite accomplished at this stage. Like, what's next for you? What's the next mountain to climb?
Yes, it's a great question, and I guess I'm still figuring that out. Right, I launched the Founder Sanctuary after releasing the book earlier on this year, and the Founder Sanctuary is very much a reflection of the book. It's for founders, male, female, to come in and support them through modules, through resources, through peer coaching and community, which has been absolutely key. That's kind of what's worked brilliantly within the Founder Sanctuary over a period of 3 months, so a little bit like an accelerator program. And the first cohort of founders is about to finish that next month. And we'll continue our relationship, and then we'll open a new cohort after the summer. But that's probably only about 30% of my time. The rest of my time is spent on working with executives and executive visibility, tapping into authentic influence. There is an announcement going live actually on LinkedIn about this tomorrow. And I feel that at this point I have a number of different strings to my bow. Yes, some of it is speaking, some of it is advisory, some of it is around the sanctuary. But a lot of it is around this kind of executive visibility piece, and kind of tapping into who you really are and telling your story. Because I think everybody, regardless of what your LinkedIn profile or title says, has a story to tell, but not everybody knows how to go about telling that story. And I'm living proof that when you do, and when you are transparent, and when you are engaged on the right platforms and in the right way, it really can pay dividends. I would not be here talking to you now, I'm sure, had I not gone on that journey myself, right?
Interesting. Your kids, last but not least, how do you balance that with your entrepreneurial life, and what's your parenting style? What are you teaching them?
Oh God, I mean, we could do a whole podcast about this, I think, couldn't we? I am a parent who wants my kids to be as independent as possible, as kind as possible, as understanding as possible of other people's situations. And I want them to live lives that are reflective of who they are, and what their strengths are. So I'm fairly hands-off, I would say. I think most people would say that about me. I'm fairly hands-off as a parent. The one thing I'm a bit strict on is screen time. But everything else, I just try and sort of guide them along the way. And I hope that will help them to make good decisions for themselves, because God knows I don't want to be making those decisions for them for very much longer. But yeah, I mean, look, they're 10, 9 and 6 now. They're brilliant kids. They get the loveliest write-ups from school on their reports, and that means the absolute world. And they're global kids. They've been around the world, and I hope that we continue to show them that.
Love that. Helen, thanks for being on today. Where can people find out more about you?
You can jump onto LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest place. Helen McGuire, it's pretty easy. Otherwise, you can drop me a note, helen@helenmcguire.co, and I'm always pretty responsive on there. So yeah, I'd love to chat.
So that was Ellen and Charles for another founder